The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and FreedomSlips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, FreedomSlips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
You're back with David Mackey's Shiny Side Out on freedomslips.com on the #1 listener-supported talk radio on the net, so push the donate button or subscribe to the archives, which are currently free. You can also get yourself some great merchandise from the station's website. Maybe a t-shirt or a mug or even an EMP-proof thumb drive with survival documents on it. So if the S hits the F, you've at least got something, I suppose. You'll need a generator, though, and you'll need to have stored your computer inside a Faraday cage because the EMP will blow it. But, once you got electricity again, then you could take that to the bank, which would then still be restoring stuff. Unlikely they'd ever return, and therefore you don't need your mortgage anymore. Woohoo! Thanks for listening to... Did you like it where I took that, Mickey? Thanks for listening to Revolution Radio. Mickey and I are halfway through show number 533.
330 and 500. I mean, it's half 1,000. Still blows my mind, you know.
Wow. And this is... I know, right? This is Prophecies, I think, part 7. I'm sure I'm right. And... last week, we were talking about a number of, and let me just get the heading. It's way back in the show notes. Oh my goodness! So 30 predictions in history that came true.
I know, right?
And I think we're at point 21.
I'm gonna say that's true. You still check that.
It is. I've got the note.
You take it, my friend.
I'll take it. Online shopping. It was actually on the year that I was born. I was born in 1967.
Yep.
Oh, I'm sorry, Lady Horse. Yes, I won't mention that ever again. Don't worry, because you won't have a computer anyway. And okay, so the EMP-proof thumb drives are not available at the station's website any longer. Okay, so online shopping. This prophecy came from 1967, before there was an online, or before there was an on the line. Few people saw the short film 1999 AD when it first came out in 1967, which is a shame because it showcases a house of tomorrow that feels very much like the house of today. From push-button kitchens to fingertip shopping to electronic correspondence machines, it accurately predicted many modern conveniences that we take for granted today. And for a deeper look at what time was like, here's what it was like to live without today's technologies we totally take for granted. If that's a link, yep, I'm going to put that into the chat room, Mackie.
Good man, thank you. Which brings us to Mark Twain's death in 1909. Mark Twain was born just 2 weeks after Halley's Comet appeared in the skies in 1835, as he remarked to his biographer, who published his book in 1909. It is coming again next year, and I expect to go out with it. Which is interesting because that means he was 76, passed away. It will be the greatest disappointment of my life if I don't go out with Halley's Comet. It may have sounded like a joke, and it was likely intended as such, but true to his word, Twain died on April 21, 1910, just a single day after Halley's Comet returned. His real name, of course, is Mark Clemens. Mark Twain was his writer's name, referring to a measure of depth used by riverboat captains on the Mississippi. Mark Twain meaning Mark II.
Wow.
There you go, a bit of learning there for you.
How's them learnings? Okay, point number 23 of the predictions that have come true. Coffee machines, microwaves, and meal prep. 1964. Isaac Asimov, well, he's one of my idols, the legendary science fiction author and biochemistry professor, had a few thoughts in 1964 about what the world would look like 50 years into the future. Writing for the New York Times, he told readers that by 2014, gadgetry will continue to relieve mankind of tedious jobs. People would be able to cook auto meals, ready to eat within seconds, and complete lunches and dinners with the food semi-prepared, stored in a freezer until ready for processing. There would also be devices capable of heating water and converting it into coffee. We may not have any robot butlers yet, not very far away, but at least we have the microwaves, the coffee machines, and Blue Apron that Asimov promised us a half century ago.
And look, he was a smart fellow. He was a clear thinker.
He was on the money.
Yeah, because he had a good insight into what was possible. Right, he's a scientist. He's a biochemist, but he was probably more like a polymath than anything else. And it was really a credit to him and his writing. To all the things that came from. He's like a Jules Verne. Right? He's like Asimov and Clarke. So I think Arthur C. Clarke and Isaac Asimov are very much in the same vein as Jules Verne, just 100.
Asimov made the 3 rules for robotics.
That's correct. That is exactly right.
Yeah.
And look, as far as a robot butler is concerned, did you see the latest advancements in robotics?
Yeah. I mean, I watch every year. There's a competition.
Yeah, I mean, it's just
an expo on them. Yeah.
Some of it is just. I mean, we've come such a long way in this space. It's actually terrifying. Mm-hmm. In some ways, I guess terrifying in a good way, if there's such a thing.
They're still not walking autonomously around in the appearance of a flesh suit that makes it look human.
Not yet. No, you're right.
We can't be far from that.
Yeah, look, I'm with you. I really think. Look, if we see, this is the funny thing, and I hate to be indelicate, but it is true.
Platform.
Well, I was more thinking like they're actually sex robots now for sale.
Oh, yeah, I know.
Okay, which are they're striving to be as lifelike from, I guess, flesh and skin.
And there was texture. A guy that married his own.
Yes.
Yes.
That was where I was going. I mean, that's just a little.
Well, people do whatever they want. So.
Yeah. Hey, I'm not judging.
But that industry, without saying the word again, that industry itself is the first to adopt new technologies.
Oh, 100%.
And has
100%.
Ever since technology started.
Oh, yeah.
So it's like when you see it become adopted in that industry, then it's not far away from the mainstream. And, so like autonomous robots, no, we're actually, to say that, we're actually in the largest decline of marriages and relationships that we've ever seen. They say this, never seen this in humanity.
That's right. It's due in no small part to the fact that we are becoming further and further removed from each other.
That's right.
In the West, we're talking about we're talking about the first world countries, not so much in third world countries. That's not what's happening at all.
Hands up, quick poll, hands up to those who have sat in the same room as a loved one. Now, it could be a child or a partner, or a preferred partner, and message them on a device, even though they're in the same room, and you got a response.
I think that'd be
hands up.
Large. That'd be fair. Yeah, it'd be large number of people there. 100%. My hand is up.
My hand is up.
I've seen it. I've seen a conversation happen at the at the restaurant between the people that are having a meal together, which is probably the saddest thing. On the devices, though, right? Not talking to each other. So that's where we have come.
That's in support of the argument that the people aren't talking to each other anymore, even though they're in the same room. They know they're in the room with the other people and they're sharing the experience of being in the room with other people, but not in the conventional sense of the words.
No, not at all. Not even close. Which brings us to a bit, well, it's not really a better topic, but an interesting topic around World War II. The French general and military theorist Ferdinand Foch wasn't all that impressed with the end of World War I. In fact, he seemed fairly certain that the so-called war to end all wars was anything but. According to Winston Churchill, when Foch learned of the peace treaty of Versailles, he was deeply displeased that Germany would be left largely intact and remarked to Churchill, "This is not peace, it is an armistice for 20 years. Turns out he was pretty darn close. World War II was officially began almost exactly 20 years and 68 days after the signing of the Treaty of Versailles. Foch died on March 29, 1939, and therefore never saw his predictions come to pass. Now, you don't have to be a rocket scientist or a prophet or a seer or a medium or any kind of paranormal entity in order to foresee World War II coming out of World War I. The Treaty of Versailles crippled Germany beyond repair.
Mm-hmm.
It did. I know this because my grandparents lived through the 20s and they told me what happened. And it left a lot of veterans with nothing to do. So you had like millions, literally millions of soldiers that came home from the war with nothing to do. Right? So what did? They organized themselves, is what they did, into either communist or socialist, parties and I don't want to say gangs, but movements, and then also extreme right movements. Right? And the Nazi Party, or the NSDAP, was just one party amongst many. They happened to, win out in the end, but they were running battles between the communists and the National Socialists at the time, right? Anyway, so you could see World War II coming a mile away, right?
However, to be accurate, to say it was, 20 years, I think that's a good one. It wasn't 15 or 10.
Yeah. No, that's true.
Or 45 years. Yeah.
He got it pretty right.
Yeah.
And kudos to his insight, no doubt.
No, and look, I support your argument too that yes, it was completely apparent that something was going to happen.
Yeah, and look, would we do it? Would we do a treaty like this today? The answer is no. We would not.
But we're doing very similar things.
We're doing the appeasement with Russia is what we're doing. You're right. There is that. That's not the smart.
There is that, and then there's the West versus China.
Yeah,
and we're doing things right now that aren't, collaboratively speaking, the most positive outcome devices. So
not by a long shot.
Good luck.
100%. Tell us about the next. I like.
Thank you, please.
A lot.
Please.
I like it a lot.
All right. So this is point number 25 of 30. Waterbeds. Hands up. Who slept on one? I've got my hand up. Waterbeds. 1961. Most people remember science fiction writer Robert Heinlein as the author who predicted the Cold War and the nuclear arms race that dominated much of the 20th century. Sure, that's pretty impressive, but we're way more impressed with how he inspired the waterbed. His 1961 novel, Stranger in a Strange Land, contained a convincing, detailed description of a mattress filled with water, which he called a hydraulic bed. I don't know why that didn't catch on. Though he never capitalized on actually bringing them to fruition, just a decade later in 1971, art student and inventor Charles Pryor Hall secured a patent for the thing. Bugger.
I know, right?
It's the same as 2001: A Space Odyssey, and the iPad.
Yeah. But look, that's right. I mean, a lot of people. I mean, and Jules Verne should have had 10 patents.
Submarines, yes.
But that didn't happen. Interestingly, the next one is I thought. I mean, being in technology,
Mm-hmm.
I thought this interesting because I've actually read that book. Stranger, I forgot it on my shelf. So this is about screensavers, believe it or not. 1961. Heinlein's again Heinlein's Stranger in a Strange Land, and I do recommend that book highly. It's about alien creatures trying to fit in with human society, and within that narrative, he creates a typical middle-class home of the future that isn't that far off from what we actually have today, particularly when it comes to personal computers. Now, this is 1961. Computers fill warehouses. Okay, that's where we are. They fill warehouses in 1961. When a computer, or what he called a stereo vision tank, was left unattended, Heinlein wrote, it became disguised as an aquarium, filled with animated guppies and tetras swimming around. Of course, we recognize that today, obviously, as a screensaver.
Remember in the 90s, Maggie, when you could actually download that?
I know.
The fish tank screensaver. Yeah, I know,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
I had it.
Such a cool thing.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, so geeky, but
Oh, get your geek on. That's what I say.
Get your geek on, I say. Do it.
Number 27. The 2 moons of Mars.
We spoke about this separately in other occasions as well.
Yeah, that's right. So this is from 1726 was when the prophecy was first brought forward. More than 100 years before we learned that Mars has 2 moons, Phobos and Deimos, Jonathan Swift made an educated guess. Well, that's probably the most incorrect way of putting it, about the red planet. In his 1726 novel Gulliver's Travels, he wrote about 2 lesser stars or satellites which revolve about Mars. Even more remarkably, he predicted their exact size and speeds of rotation. Wow, that's getting closer and closer. That's like, 276,000 to 1. Given that no technology existed yet that would have made Mars visible, how could Swift possibly have known this? It's a great question. There's been a lot of wild speculation, including theories that Swift himself might have been a Martian. Wow. Do you think it's one of those things that you remember? Remember how we spoke about the genetic remnants of a memory being passed on to several 10 generations of mice, for instance, where they never had contact with the parents to learn it. The only way they could have remembered that was through genetic, passing that information on genetically through DNA. So is it possible? If there was life on Mars and there was a cataclysm, it's quite possible that they moved here to Earth.
Yeah, it is. Absolutely, it's possible.
It's a thing.
And look, every day we're hearing something new about Mars, and we see really funny pictures from the rover. Are all of them true? I don't know. Mm-hmm. But there is something there, right? There's definitely that. So yeah, I don't know, man. It's
they found water.
It's something.
You saw that drone footage.
Yeah.
So yeah, and there's caves and everything. So yeah, goodness knows what's going to happen next. What's number 28?
28. Now this is one of my favorites. We discussed this ad nauseum around the medication of the world and the rest and so forth. So that it's a really important one in my mind to mention. This is around antidepressants, and it was from 31. And this is from Aldous Huxley's rather groundbreaking 1931 novel Brave New World, which we all know. We all know that one, right? And I don't have. If you haven't read it, read it. Don't watch the TV show. It's terrible. It's awful.
It is. Yeah.
But read the novel. Sit through it. It's very similar in tone to 1984. But if you can do now, the London government of 2540. Now he was quite generous in his. He thought it'll take us 500 years to lose our collective mind.
That's what he got wrong. That's
I know,
right.
right?
Yeah.
Of 25, 40 makes sure its citizens remain loyal by giving them soma. Soma, of course, meaning sleep.
Hmm.
A legal drug that raised a quite impenetrable wall between the actual universe and their minds. Very much like the Matrix, or the wall, the cave wall we all believe to be true, that we're all watching all day long. In other words, it made them content and unburdened by sadness or anger. Eyes shone, cheeks were flushed. The inner light of universal benevolence broke out on every face in happy, friendly smiles. If that sounds like modern antidepressants, you're not the only one to notice. The Journal of American Physicians and Surgeons noted in 2016 that Huxley's novel set the stage for our love affair with mind-altering pharmaceuticals.
Oh, that takes me back. So, do you know what's really funny is that a recent story just last week about the density of our man-made pharmaceuticals and antidepressants are not excluded from their statement, which is that the fish off Miami, of all places, had greater toxicity of antidepressants than the human population.
Is that right?
Yeah. Because there's so much of it in the water.
There's nothing normal about that.
So, you know, I looked at the positive side. It doesn't sound like me, but I looked at the positive side of that and thought, well, the fish are happy. There's some happy fish right there.
Look at those fishes.
You know, with all the tranquilizers and everything and Xanax, and you can only imagine all the other things. The fish would be so docile you could probably just eat them while they're swimming. But, you know.
Let me eat you.
yeah. See, I knew you'd go there.
I'm sorry. I cannot help myself.
Okay, that's a very bovine joke for you, Mackie. See, I knew what you were talking about. And it was in a cafe at the end of the universe, wasn't it?
Uh-huh.
The restaurant.
Why do you have
restaurant?
a problem? Yeah. See, but the funny thing is this. The creature, I want to call it the creature, makes a very good point. Why do you have a problem? Because Arthur Dent was uncomfortable eating a sentient creature. And then, you know, because it was praising itself to be eaten, right? Oh, you try my flag, it's beautiful with butter sauce, blah, 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 right? He goes, oh, I could not possibly eat you. But why you kill and eat unwilling animals, and here I am with my life's purpose to feed you, and you don't want to eat me. It doesn't make any sense. And in truth, it doesn't.
No, it doesn't. That's right.
Because, well, you know, I want to be eaten. It fulfills my purpose. And you think, oh, it's just so wrong.
It's right. I can't eat you because you're sentient.
But having said that,
yeah,
because of where we are today, and because of what we can do today, and the way I see the future developing or unfolding before us, I reckon there will be something like that in the not too distant future.
You know what? I prophesized back in the 80s that we'd be eating manufactured meat. The meat would be on a large conveyor belt, growing as it went down the length of the conveyor belt, just to be sheared off into pits that would be packaged and sold. No creature was hurt in the selling, the creation, you know, the forming, the creation and selling of it, just all derived from a single DNA or single cell from a single creature once back in whatever period of time you decided to commence this project. And now we have it for real.
Oh, we do.
It's a thing. You can buy artificial meat now. Yeah, it's
a thing. But eventually,
expensive as all hell. Yeah.
But to give you a simple example, right? When I was working at David Jones back in the 90s, and this was probably towards the mid 90s, I think, and there was this big screen TV was a rear projection. It was massive.
Oh, I remember those. Yeah.
Remember those? Yeah. It was $30,000.
They're crazy numbers.
It was. I remember this very clearly because I thought, oh my, who can afford this? I mean, even today, I'm thinking, who can afford this? Right? And this is now, quite a few years ahead in my career. But so I remember this very clearly. And it was priced. I mean, oh my God, it's so expensive. but today, yesterday, I think. What's today? Sunday. No,
I remember
on Friday.
48-inch television was $36,000
Yeah,
when
I
it was
know, yeah.
first released.
It's insane.
Yeah.
But I went to the shops in my lunch break. I think it was Friday, but it was last week. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And I went to JB Hi-Fi. JB Hi-Fi in Australia is just, obviously what it sounds like. You buy TVs and all kinds of electronic devices.
It's kind of like Circuit City if you were in California back in the 80s.
Yeah, exactly. And I saw this OLED 75-inch super flat TV. I mean, I've never seen a more appealing.
My wallet's
it's
in
4K.
the car.
Yeah, it's 4K. Yeah, I'll bring it on the back. My wallet, limited stock. So 75 inches. I said that, right? Or 85 inches, maybe 85 inches. That's huge. 85 inches. Sorry.
And it's as thin as just a single piece of glass.
Absolutely, but amazing. You want to walk into the picture.
The resolution's amazing. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and it cost a mere, and I say this with not even tongue in cheek. It cost a mere $5,000.
Good grief!
Yeah, so $30,000 on a rear projection TV, which is so resolution. Of course, back then you go, oh my God, it's the I can see.
And it was
everybody's face.
It wasn't even 16 by 9.
No, not even.
It was 4 by 3. I know, right?
Yeah, exactly. The old format, and I looked at it, and I thought, hang on, this similar TVs just before COVID, or before this whole lockdown thing, and 2 or 3 years ago, they were costing between $10,000 and $15,000.
Yeah, that's right.
So the point I'm trying to make here is, yes, at the moment, Dave, it is prohibitively expensive, right? Raw meat in a vat, as it were. But tomorrow or the day after, it will not be.
Oh, the economy of scale absolutely will make it that it would be cheaper to do that than anything else.
Oh, completely.
Yeah, that's right.
And we are going there, but see, this raises, and I do want to spend just a little bit of time on this. It raises an interesting ethical question. Because I asked the question, because, I mean,
I asked the question of vegetarians too. Yeah, that's right.
Because vegetarians and vegans are a real thing.
Yeah.
And we've got a lot in my family. And I said, well, would you eat it? And they go, oh, I don't know. Well, I mean, okay, you have to ask first, well, why are you a vegetarian, right? Well, I'm a vegetarian because it's an ethical thing for me. I don't want animals to get hurt, etc., etc. Maybe even a vegan, right? So I don't want.
That's right.
I don't use any animal products. Understood? Because we're exploiting the animal. I get that. I respect it too. Don't get me wrong, right? I really do respect it. If you make that choice, it's not easy. Yep. It's a really hard life choice to make. It really is.
But it's your choice, and hey, more to you. Yeah,
100%. In fact, if we all had a vegan lifestyle, the world would be in a better place. And I mean this again.
We'd have less greenhouse gases.
Oh, completely. Well,
that's so true. That's true.
You're right. You're 100% correct.
It is one of the greater contributors to greenhouse gases is the methane.
Yeah,
Good
you're correct.
luck.
But or are you a vegetarian because of your religion? Could be a religion where you're just not allowed the consumption of meat. Full stop. So if you're like, for example, if you're a Hindu, you wouldn't eat any beef, no matter where it came from. If you're a Jew or Muslim, you just wouldn't eat any pork, no matter where it came from. Similar, if you're a vegetarian on a religious basis, you just wouldn't eat any meat, no matter where it came from. And again, I get that too, right? But this meat doesn't have a soul, or does it? I mean, it never really was alive in the sense that we would consider it, not even from an animal point of view. So forget whether or not you think that animals have self-awareness, which I think we know they do. But let's say they don't, for argument's sake. Are you then? Well, because this was only ever a clump of cells.
So just imagine. I always try to put it this way: if you hugged the calf every day, all its life, and it had the best life it could ever have possibly ever happened, and at the time of death, in your arms, when you're loving the hugs for your cow, and it falls over finally to become deceased, having the best life it's ever had, you take a single cell from its leg, and that's it. That's right. So it never knew. It wasn't induced death. It just natural causes. had a great life, would you be celebrating its life? Or would you still maintain that it's from an animal and I cannot eat it? And I think that's such an extraordinary question to have to answer. And certainly by the people who have made their decision, for whatever reason, whether they're part of an organization or a group that it's frowned upon, or it's the rule, or whether you've done it willingly. How do you interpret that into your world? And I think that's it's really hard. Did you find the same struggle?
Yeah,
it's more than an ethical struggle, though.
Oh no, it's a fundamental question of existence, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where does soul begin and end? Where's consciousness?
Mm-hmm.
What do we consider alive and not alive, or just? I mean, would you have the same comments about an apple? I mean, there are people that will not eat anything that hasn't fallen unless it's fallen from a tree.
Yeah.
Unless it has actually fallen from a tree.
Yeah.
And again, I have no issue with that if that's who you are. I get it, right? But what is this? I don't know. It's just a fascinating. It really, for me, it's a fascinating kind of thing to think about. And I want to know what happens going forward. What will we do, right? I mean, it might become moot in the future because we maybe will no longer be sustainable to farm animals for anything. It's maybe we all drink cockroach milk. And don't laugh when I say this, because you can. There's a specific species of cockroach which apparently produces a superfood milk. It's crazy, right?
Wow.
No, it's a thing, right?
Well, eating insects is probably the next step, and I don't know what people who have decided to determine themselves to be vegetarians would be eating something that is also a vegetarian, if you know what I'm saying.
No, I'm with you. But see, it's a living creature, so
well, then you can't, right?
Right. Yeah. But look, let's march on, because we actually have a lot more to get.
Yeah, we do. So number 29.
29.
Ronald Reagan and the Fall of the Berlin Wall, 1969. Laugh In. Dan Rowan with Dick Martin's hugely popular sketch comedy show had its fair share of political commentary, but they always aimed for punchlines rather than accuracy. Still, they managed to do both in a segment called News of the Future, where they predicted not only the future presidency of Ronald Reagan, who at the time was governor of California and not exactly an obvious candidate for the White House, but also the exact year of the fall of the Berlin Wall. This all happened in 1969, a full 2 decades before East and West Germany were reunited.
I know, crazy, right?
Yeah. Jim Mackey, to me, this is that thing, and it's an example of these times in our lives where you are expected, for whatever reason, if you're the scriptwriter or whatever, or just imagining, you reach out to the future with your mind, and you get the answer. You pluck the answer, because remember, it's all the all now, or the forever when. And you just reach there and you get the answer. And I don't believe the prophecies are so far-fetched. It's rather than an imagination where you're creating it, you've actually just reached there and obtained the answer from it.
Yeah. Quite possible.
What's the last one?
Colin Kaepernick's football career. Now, I don't know Colin Kaepernick, but clearly he's some kind of footballer. 1998. In 1998, Colin Kaepernick was given a 4th grade assignment asking him to predict what he'd be doing with his life as a grown-up. If you expected Kaepernick to write football player, you'd be close. But no, the future NFL quarterback wasn't about to be that vague. What he said was this: I hope to go to a good college, he wrote. Then go to the pros and play on the Niners or Packers, even if they aren't good in 7 years. The San Francisco 49ers, as you may recall, picked Kaepernick in the 2nd round in the 2010 NFL draft. Now, that's just determination. I think that's just sheer bloody-mindedness of wanting to do something, right? but it's, yeah. So, again, what that goes to show, though, and the reason it's here, is that, in fact, you make your future. So, yes, I think some outcomes are more likely than others, and quantum mechanics tells us it's a field of probabilities, but some are more likely than others. Right? You're not going to wake up tomorrow, in all likelihood, as a stem of broccoli. You may, but it's not very likely. Right? Would you wake up in the same form you are today? Yes, that's very likely. And similarly, if you've got a very good vision for yourself and your future achievements, then you, in your mind, set yourself on the right path. Anyway, there are more predictions. Some are prophecies, some are predictions.
All right, 16 of the most impressive predictions of all time. This should be a good list. As science fiction writer Arthur C. Clarke said, if by some miracle a prophet could describe the future exactly as it was going to take place, his predictions would sound so far-fetched, so absurd, that everyone would laugh him to scorn. This Scorer post inspired us to put together, this is the author, a list of the greatest predictions ever made. From the 1660s, one day humans would transplant organs from one body to another. And I had to read that, Maggie, because my daughter just had a double lung transplant. In a handwritten list from the 1660s, Robert Boyle made a number of guesses about what the future would hold, including the cure of diseases at a distance or at least by transplantation. Considering he lived in the pre-Enlightenment era of magic and superstition, the idea of organ transplantation is incredibly forward-thinking. He also predicts GPS, the practical and certain way of finding longitudes, and other modern innovations. And they came from the Royal Society. Maggie.
It's amazing, isn't it? From 1783, the U.S. population, we mentioned this before, will reach 300 million by 1983. It fell short by a bit, but by analyzing population growth in Europe, Ezra Stiles, we spoke about him, then president of Yale University, predicted in 1783 that America's population will reach 300 million in 200 years. A little over 200 years later, so now, the US population has in fact hit 300 million.
Take the next one.
I sure can. From 1840, Alexis de Tocqueville predicted the Cold War. 1840. The British Empire is in its prime. Just want to say that, okay? There are now two great nations in the world which, starting from different points, seem to be advancing toward the same goal. And this is really interesting. Again, 1840. The Russians and the Anglo-Americans. Now, America, at that point, while no longer a colony, would hardly be considered a world power.
No.
Their point of departure is different and their paths diverse. Nevertheless, each seems called by some secret desire of providence one day to hold in its hand the destinies of half the world, wrote Alexis de Tocqueville in Democracy in America in 1840. Now remember, this was a good 70 years before any Bolshevik revolution. Now, in layman's terms, the two biggest societies thirsted for power would eventually battle to obtain it, and that fight would, of course, affect everybody, which, of course, then became Cold War. I think that's really interesting.
Completely. This one's really satisfying for me. So, in 1863, when only 60 elements were known, a Russian chemist designed a periodic table that predicted the weights and properties of the missing 40-plus elements perfectly. So the periodic table all the way up to 103 elements, even though only 60 were known. And they're also grouped in this periodic table, which was something that hadn't been done before. Because, back then we just knew hydrogen, helium, lithium, beryllium, boron, carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, fluorine, neon.
What did you?
Yeah, I used to be able to say them all in order. Okay, so Dmitry Mendeleev, a Russian chemist from the late 19th century. Yeah, that's right. He predicted the modern-day periodic table nearly perfectly. When he began his research in 1863, scientists only knew about 60 or so elements. Since then, we've discovered 40 more. And that's an exact copy of what I've just said. For example, Mendeleev foresaw the addition of germanium, which wasn't discovered until 1886, and he named the substance ecosilicon, which is unusual because, germanium is used in night vision goggles, and it's green when it's illuminated. Extraordinary.
It is. In 1865, Jules Verne predicted the Apollo moon landing. More than 100 years before Apollo 11 actually touched down, Jules Verne wrote about humankind's first trip to the moon in a short story titled From Earth to the Moon. He even knew the rocket would launch from Florida, the name of the ship, the correct number of astronauts aboard, and the feeling of weightlessness they would experience. In 1865, Verne had absolutely no way of knowing gravity behaves differently in space. Now, see, this is the thing. We forget all the things we didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
Right, Dave? And then,
Sorry, I can't remember.
and then we're not really amazed at all by anything because we know it.
Mm-hmm.
So if someone writes about it, then okay, so what? It's the big so what? It's because they had no way of knowing it, like Swift and the 2 moons of Mars. How could you possibly have known that? Well, you couldn't.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So one of the things, Becky, I noticed that was really the standout for me. I used to watch, well, I still watch, really old sci-fi from the 40s. So both produced in Russia and in America. Mm-hmm. Their vision of what space travel looked like was more like the inside of a submarine. Mm-hmm. Lots of steel, lots of holes cut in steel to make it lighter. Kind of like either aeronautics or a submariner style design. One thing that was the biggest standout is all of their rockets took off from the tail and landed on their tail in whole. There was no second, third stage, no crew compartment, no parachute that landed it. No, exactly what Elon Musk has currently done. And we didn't go that direction. Now we've gone to that direction. But in the 40s, they skipped past in their imaginations of the future all the way to what Elon Musk has currently created. Isn't that something?
Oh, yeah. I think it's astounding.
Yeah, completely. And in fact, there was one of the movies, I said really quick, one of the movies was actually about a billionaire who had, the government had given him the task of creating the rockets which they would then adopt for themselves because they claimed they didn't have the money to do the development. I just, wow, that was the story of Elon Musk right there. Anyway, from 1898, a short story predicted the sinking of the Titanic. In 1898, a prolific short story writer named Morgan Robertson wrote a novella called Futility or The Wreck of the Titan. The book detailed how the largest ship ever made crashed into an iceberg and sank. Sound familiar? The RMS Titanic sank under those exact circumstances only 14 years later.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
And this is a very famous case that's always quoted, but it's always, of course, dismissed by the debunkers. Oh, any big large ship would be called Titan something or other. Yeah, well, maybe. Oh, I know.
Well, its sister ship wasn't. It wasn't Titan 2, was it?
No, not really. But it's a debunker. It's okay. It's all right. it's funny.
Debunker, you don't need to get up out of your armchair.
That's right.
Armchair debunker. Yeah. Stay there. Be comfortable.
Which brings us to Nikola Tesla in 1909. Again, not surprising, this one, simply because Nikola Tesla, right? And this is what he said. It will soon be possible in 1909 to transmit wireless messages all over the world so simply that any individual can own and operate his own apparatus. And he said he actually told this to the New York Times.
Wow.
Which, of course, is completely true today. 100% correct.
Nailed it.
That's what happened.
I stole it. Stole it from you.
Right.
1914. You know, you've got to think about this. It's only 6 years after Tunguska.
Oh, yeah, I know, right?
H.G. Wells predicted the atomic bomb. H.G. Wells' 1914 novel, The World Set Free, describes a city-destroying atomic bomb. Although Wells didn't know if or how nuclear detonation could really happen, the Manhattan Project, which designed the atomic bomb, didn't begin until 1942. Wow. He understood a bit about radioactive elements. Regardless, Wells, or H.G. Wells, knew that if humans figured out how to blow up these compounds simultaneously, the result would be really bad news.
Yep. Yeah, this one is, again, not that amazing, but in 1987, I remember in 1987, we didn't even have a VCR yet. Right? I grew up. We had like TV, whatever was on the TV, whatever.
We had a VCR at home.
Oh, look at you,
in the 80s. Yeah, look at us, really rich people. But there wasn't any way of doing anything else with it. You just recorded TV with it.
Yeah, that's true. But yeah, we didn't have that. So there weren't any videotechs. I mean, you still went to the movies to see a movie, and if you wanted to see a movie on TV, it'll be like 60 years old, and that's just how it was. Well, no, it's not that time, but you know what I'm talking about. Now, however, Robert Ebert said in 1987, while he was being interviewed by Omni magazine, is that still around? We will have high definition, widescreen television sets, and a push-button dialing system to order the movie you want at the time you want it. So he was almost.
So what? The only point in our lives where we saw something on the widescreen was when we were at the movies, and so seeing the little tiny square television at home is a really big call to have
100%.
high definition. We didn't even have an aerial that prevented ghosts from appearing, the ghosting thing and all the static. In fact, there was one channel, I think Channel 7, that we were only over the hill from. We couldn't even determine which ghost was the actual character. There was like 3 copies of the people on the screen. But you were determined to watch it regardless. Oh, Alpha's on. Great, let's watch that. Yeah.
100%. I don't care what it looks like. I'm watching it.
My kids today can't deal with an ad on the television, on free-to-air, let alone attempting to diagnose or determine which ghost is the actual character. Crazy. We were made of sterner stuff, mate, I'll tell you.
I'll tell you what, that's the fact. That's the truth, my friend.
When 100%. HD came in, I was like, and like digital TV, I was like, oh, thank heavens. I don't need an aerial anymore. That was such a waste of my life. But I sat there every morning, watching the cartoons and what's the other one? Oh, yes, my lady. Thunderbirds.
Of course, Thunderbirds.
I had to watch the Thunderbirds. From 1988, Isaac Asimov predicted we would use the internet to learn. During an interview with Bill Moyers in 1988, science fiction author Isaac Asimov basically predicted the internet, but more specifically, how students would benefit from universal access to information. Asimov said that through computers, we'd have access to connected libraries, which would act as a teacher in the form of access to the gathered knowledge of the human species. Inherently critical of the education system, he dreamed up online learning as a solution. Nowadays, what people call learning is forced on you. Everyone is forced to learn the same thing on the same day at the same speed in class. And everyone is different. For some, it goes too fast. For some, too slow. For some, in the wrong direction, he said. Wise words.
100%. And see, we still, in fact, we do that to some extent, but we still haven't gone in the right direction with it completely, in my opinion, right? And what I mean by that is we have this amazing tool, but we're not using it effectively at all. Our educational system is just shockingly bad. Could we? Yes, we could, absolutely. But we're not enough. This is from 1993. Again, not that astounding. An AT&T ad campaign was launched in 1993. It was the Imagine If You Will campaign. In dozens of television commercials, the company asked viewers, have you ever? And then named some crazy feat of technology that couldn't be accomplished at the time, like sending a fax from the beach. This image, the image from the campaign that was here, I can show it to you, but it looks like a tablet. It looks like a tablet computer 20 years later. And bear in mind, in 1993, we had just gotten into personal computers.
That's right.
If you're lucky enough, you might have had a PC. I mean,
100 megahertz.
100 megahertz. Yeah. I think I had one, but I was debating whether or not I should get 16 megabytes of RAM or 32. Will I ever use 32 megabytes of RAM?
Wow.
That's my working memory. Would it just be a crazy expense which you could never recoup? I'm sorry.
So how much RAM do you have in yours now? I got to think like 32 terabytes or something, right?
I got an Apple here. I don't know. It's like
crazy.
The moon. I have the moon.
The moon, the whole of the moon. Yeah. All right. Okay. So, 32 gig. What am I talking about? Terabytes in storage. That meant from 1997. Chris Rock predicted O.J. Simpson's "If I Did It" murder plan. On Chris Rock's 1997 series on HBO, he produced a skit reminiscing about various celebrities who had dropped by the studio to promote their products. He joked that O.J. Simpson came by to talk about his new video. I didn't kill my wife, but if I did, here's how I do it. O.J. Simpson published his hypothetical plan for murder in November in 2006. And the source is Cracked, which admits that Simpson could have actually seen the skit and then named his book.
That's just, I mean, that whole thing with O.J. Simpson is just wrong on every level.
He's using his Chewbacca defense. It doesn't make sense. South Park.
No. 2006, Scrubs. I don't know if you ever watched it.
I love Scrubs.
I watched a couple episodes. It's pretty cool. It's like a medical team, etc. Doctors,
in a
whatever.
Hospital,
it's comedy.
That's right.
Yeah, it's a comedy.
Yeah.
And now, in 2006, a janitor makes an eerie comment to JD, one of the protagonists in Scrubs. In my opinion, we should be looking for Bin Laden in Pakistan, he said. And lo and behold, US soldiers did indeed find the terrorist hiding in a well-guarded house in Pakistan. Sure they did.
Yeah, sure.
Look,
I think this will be the last one. From 2006, The president of Euro-Pacific Capital predicted the housing market crash. Peter Schiff, president of Euro-Pacific Capital, predicted the financial crisis in 2008 on numerous primetime news shows. The basic problem with the US economy is that we have too much consumption and borrowing and not enough production and savings. And what's going to happen is the American consumer is basically going to stop consuming, he told Kudlow and Company in 2005. At the same time, others, including economist for President Reagan, Art Laffer, completely denied looming economic troubles. On the show, he said, the American economy has never been in better shape, and even called monetary policy spectacular. That's hilarious.
Back on your face there, buddy.
Good on you.
Hey, baby. Yeah, I think that's where we.
Yeah, it is where we have to see for this week.
There's only a couple left, but I'll put more things in for next week around this. And
please do.
Yeah,
I can't edit the document. So, look, this has been Dave and Mickey's Shiny Side Out. This has been also titled episode 533. Stay tuned for Jer Bear's awesome after hours show. But you can actually call in, listen in, but call in as well if you feel it necessary and become part of it. That's how Mickey and I started. Now, this has been Prophecy Part 7. Next week, we'll do Part 8. And in the meantime, do pay attention to the media and those really weird, quirky stories, because they're the ones that get dismissed. They're the ones you won't remember, but they're the ones you should pay attention to.
Oh, nice.
All right, we'll see you next week. Take care, everyone.